Hey guys, this is going to be an epic video, so maybe you can help me get 1 million views on this sucker. Okay, you might say this 1903 Springfield rifle saw action in Pearl Harbor, but the truth is it saw action from a distance. Maybe it'd be better to say it heard action because it was on the USS California. The USS California was hit by 2 torpedoes on December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor Day. 2 torpedoes below the waterline, and then 2 bombs on top of the deck. The ship caught on fire, burned out all the electrical, which stopped the pumps from pumping water out. Long story short, it very slowly filled with water and sunk. And this gun, while it was sinking, was below deck in one of their armories. The ship sunk in a shallow part of the harbor, and therefore the bottom of the ship went into the mud, and luckily it was able to stay fairly level, and with most of the ship being above the waterline. And the bottom line is it was able to be salvaged very quickly. Those of you who know Pearl Harbor well, you know we lost most of our battleships that day, but they also were in a condition where we were able to salvage them. And the USS California was one of the first ships to be raised, put back in port, and restored and back in action by 1944. As it was sitting in the mud, it was beginning to sink even more. And so, of course, they wanted to salvage the ship as quickly as possible. So they started taking the guns off, and there's actually pictures of them lifting the 14-inch guns off of the deck. I believe there were 4 turrets and 14-inch guns. There was a dozen guns that were lifted, again, taking the weight off of it. And one of the other things they did is salvage all of the guns and ammunition. Yes, they even reused the ammunition. They salvaged all of that from the ship. This is a list of what they salvaged, and it's in the documentation that comes with this gun. So this documentation about this rifle, and by the way, I didn't know that there were rifles and other guns that were salvaged from Pearl Harbor Day. That was all news to me, but it makes absolute sense. And when I heard about this gun, we had a consignor send it to us. You can see here how much money these sell for. It seems pretty expensive, but it's really rare to find a gun that we can attribute to a specific battle. And this archival research group, they sent a letter saying that they have documentation. Here we have copies. We can see that the rifles that were recovered, these are all the serial numbers. And on page 2, we can see it's marked 1012843. And that's this rifle here. You can see the serial number matching the gun that was salvaged from the ship. Here's a list of what they salvaged in terms of the ammunition and guns in the hull of the ship. 352 1903 rifles, 53 1911 Colts, Browning automatic rifles. There was 26, that's the BAR, and then 16 Lewis guns, and only 2 Thompson submachine guns. Now, if I were only going to own 1 gun out of there, I would take one of those Thompsons. So that's a little bit about what this rifle went through, and it has been completely restored. After it was in the salt water for a period of time, a number of days, they salvaged it sometime after that, and they needed guns and ammunition because they really were afraid that Pearl Harbor or the Hawaiian Islands were going to be invaded. There was a lot of, the military wasn't panicked, but there was a lot of panic about them invading. There was a contingent of Marines and a Marine Corps base there that this then was sent to. But first it had to be completely restored, and you can tell from the finish on this, we'll take a closer look, that this has clearly been restored, and you can even see the rework marks on the stock. We'll show you those. But then it was sent to Battery 4, issued to the Marine Corps in Battery 4. You can see that's documented, to be prepared for the pending invasion, which never happened. Now, of course, at this point, we know that the 1903 was not their state-of-the-art weapon. It was slowly, the military was slowly replacing the 1903s which is a World War I weapon. Where did the old equipment go? As they were replacing frontline troops with state-of-the-art weapons, the older guns would go to places like a battleship, because what are the chances that a battleship is going to need a rifle? Actually, on a battleship, if you're going to war, you'd probably be much better suited with a life vest than a rifle. But all that is to say, the older equipment was being sent to the Navy, aircraft carriers, battleships, and this was on the USS California. Come take a closer look at this rifle. Okay, here's the rifle. And you can see the condition. If you look here, you see the serial number. You can see how the finish is like new condition. The bolts have been moved a little bit. You can see the flaming bomb and SA. Caliber on this, by the way, is 30-06. Same as the Garand, so they use the same information. You can see the Springfield Armory and the flaming bomb. That was the insignia for the Springfield Armory. You can see the condition here. It's like new condition, but again, refurbished. 818, so this is a model 1903. It was first commissioned for the U.S. Army in 1903, also the patent date. And it was used in all of the services, first used in the Philippine War, and then, of course, used heavily in World War I. It was the main battle rifle that was issued to all the military troops in World War I. Of course, the United States got in late, 1917. The war was over in November of 1918, so my conjecture would be this was made for World War I, thinking that we were going to be in it for a while longer, but then the war ended, so this probably was made and never issued. Then again, conjecture on my part, it probably sat in storage unissued until it was then issued to the U.S. Navy and went to the USS California. I already said that that probably was because it was considered older equipment. The frontline troops were getting the M1 Garand, later the M1 Carbine. You can see the stock coming down this way. This does have the elevation sight. Actually, in Pearl Harbor, if it had been used, they would have used this for firing at aircraft. Here's the safety. Off, on. It's very simple. Off and on here. This is a weld that I'll mention later, right here, because we think it was cut and used for drilling purposes. Here is a rework marking, AP and 7K. AP is the rework mark and 7K, I'm not sure, maybe somebody out there can tell me. And this is the cartouche and the inspector stamp. So that's the way it came from the factory. Bolt action, very smooth. These, even though it's a model 1903, I mentioned we used in World War I. It was actually used all the way through Vietnam. You do see it in World War II for sniper rifles. They found that the bolt action was a little more accurate, so they would put a scope on it. Here's a picture of a sniper rifle. We have sold these off our site. If you watch Saving Private Ryan, you have that left-handed guy who's going one of these with a 1903 reaching across. You can see that when he's in the bell tower, and I think he's praying and quoting scripture as he's shooting the Germans. So it was used as a sniper rifle all the way through Korea and even into Vietnam, and then after that they were pretty much replaced. The only other thing is the butt plate. You can see the checkered butt plate, and they did have a little opening here when you pop that open, which is very tight, but there would be a cleaning kit that would go into the stock about that far. There'd be an oil and a cleaning rod that went into the butt stock. So that's about it. These are easy to take apart, you know, take the stock off and check all the internals, pretty easy to do. There's one little feature here, or maybe flaw, that I'm looking at. It almost looks like a cutout. So my fantasy would be that in Pearl Harbor, it was hit by a bullet from a Japanese Zero, and it went in right here, and then they just repaired it and cut that. Of course, I'm making all that up, but that looks like a flaw in the wood. It's nice and smooth now, either a flaw in the wood or a repair that was done later. So that's an interesting part of this rifle. The most interesting part of the rifle, however, is the serial number that is found on this list. So to summarize, what an historical piece. I'm honored, I was seriously privileged to be able to even hold this piece of history. What are the chances of getting a gun and you know exactly where it served, what battle it was in, this one being used in Pearl Harbor, and then going to the Hawaiian Islands, US Marines, probably never saw service, probably never left the island. After the war, it was probably used as a drilling rifle, because you can see here we have a weld, which means it was cut and then welded back together. So this gun was issued to the U.S. Navy. It was then reissued after the saltwater damage and used by the U.S. Marines. And then it was reissued again, probably as a drilling rifle. And then finally, after it was used as a drilling rifle, it was restored one more time, welded, and now used by collectors who like to preserve the history of the gun. So if this one could talk, it would have quite a story to tell. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. I learned a lot about these guns that saw action at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941.